Thank you, Arnab, and good afternoon, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a privilege to be here today with all of you at the 2019 session of the CEEW Energy Transitions. We've had the privilege of working with Arnab and the team at CEEW for almost since when they were set up 9 years ago. It's indeed gratifying to see the growth in the organization and the good quality of work that they've been doing all these years and will continue to do so in the years ahead. We've been associated at Shakti with their annual event since it was first started in 2017. And it has grown since then from just talking about renewable energy to broader energy transitions. And the scope of participation has now grown significantly as well, and we see international organizations like the IEA, the International Solar Alliance, and other international participants here, as well as members of the renewable energy and power sector in India. And it's again, gratifying to see the growth of scope and the content that this conversation generates. We've been pleased to support many of the studies that CEEW has undertaken, and I think you'll see a good collection of their publications outside. And it's been our privilege to support work on rooftop solar, on energy finance, on integration of solar energy, etc. And all of these, I think, will provide some useful basis for the conversations that take place here in these sessions over the next day and a half. The conversation on transitions is obviously very timely. There's a lot that's happened in quick succession over the last few years. There's been a telescoping of developments, the most dramatic of which has been the fall in solar energy prices, which has really upended the whole conversation on whether one should be moving to renewable and solar energy because it's a good thing to do, to is it the right thing to do from just pure economics as well. And we've seen even across the world, but particularly in India, the investment made in non-fossil fuel sources of energy have actually exceeded thermal-based power generation investment for the first time over the last year or two, which is quite dramatic if you think back to 10 years when CEEW was set up, whether this would be a conversation we'd be having today. I'm not sure how many of us would then, even the most optimistic ones, would have thought so at that point in time. The government of India, of course, has recognized both the need and the opportunity for action, and has been doing significant amounts in terms of setting targets and in implementing programs, including the what seemed to be the very ambitious 175 gigawatt renewable energy target that was set a few years ago that now we're discussing actually raising it. And other schemes like Ujjwala, Ujala, Kusum, Subhagya, and the rooftop solar initiatives, many of them that got a re-up just in the first quarter of this year. And with the continuation of the government, I think they've hit the ground running. We look forward to seeing much more focus on implementing some of these very ambitious targets. And as we look around us, as was briefly mentioned in the opening video, rural cooking, lighting, electricity access are truly being transformed in this country. The numbers of people who now have access to clean cooking, to electricity connections and lighting, especially in rural India, is numbers in the hundreds of millions, as was mentioned. Notwithstanding all the good news, the progress made, the positive actions taken, we still have a long, long way to go. As a developing nation with low per capita average energy consumption, our needs are very significant and need to increase very significantly in order to meet our development objectives. And the challenge really is to do so on a sustainable basis and on an affordable basis, and one that is accessible to the entire population. And that is still a long road that we need to take. We have to do work on issues like energy storage, on grid integration, on the emission norms for thermal power plants, on electricity market and tariff reforms, and on sustainable cooling and an efficient cold chain to support our agriculture sector. And all this investment obviously has to be underpinned with access to finance to make all this happen. We need to focus on decarbonization of the economy, decentralization of power generation. We need to use renewable energy and energy efficiency to reduce emissions, to meet both our stated goals under the NDCs, but much more importantly, to control the harmful climate change that we see around us every day, and it seems to get worse and worse. And the themes that must weave through all of these policy goals is the quality of supply and the availability of access. Only this will lead to the inclusive energy access that is needed to meet our healthcare, education, and livelihood goals. Technology developments are clearly helping in the electrification. We're seeing this most dramatically on the transport side, and need to see it grow in industry as well. The switch in energy sources from petrol, diesel, and coal will throw up operational and other challenges as we strive for cleaner and more efficient energy. However, as we discuss the future, there is a very significant present-day issue, I believe, that I want to take some minutes to discuss that can potentially come in the way and impede the progress we so sorely need. And that one issue I would offer is the health of our distribution sector. This is an important linchpin between the generation of electricity and the consumers at the other end. And in our country, a large percentage of the DISCOM sector, as we call it, is in state ownership. We have exceptions in the private sector, which seem to be doing well in some of the major urban centers. But by and large, the bulk of the distribution is in state government hands across the states of India. So we have this anomaly of, even today, hundreds of millions of people not getting 24/7 electricity access. And yet, if you look at the statistics on, say, our thermal power plants, they're running at an average plant load factor of less than 60%. And that actually, the average masks the actual distribution. There are plants that are lying mothballed, brand new plants that are lying mothballed, both coal and gas. And the growing generation capacity that's being created in solar and wind is also struggling to ensure offtake and to be paid for that offtake. So, how do we reconcile excess supply with inadequate access for hundreds of millions of people? And the fulcrum, the linchpin here is the DISCOM. And the problem is actually quite simple. It's easy to blame them on multiple grounds, but the problem lies in the fact that they pay more for the product they purchase than they get from their customers. And you don't need a master's degree in business to know that isn't a sustainable or viable business model. If you're going to lose money for every unit of product that you sell, you're not going to stay in business very long. Given the structures under which we operate, what's happened is that these organizations have accumulated hundreds of crores of debt, and there's no foreseeable pathway for them to get out of it. And periodically, every decade or 15 years, a government, as did this one, comes with trying to make some reforms, financial engineering reforms, which don't address the basic problem. So as every day goes by, these people who run these businesses, and they're indeed businesses, they're not charities or philanthropies, they are unable to meet the basic need, which is to provide the entire population of this area, the service, with affordable and reliable power. And without access to that affordable and reliable power, the populations that are denied either do without, even in the 21st century, live in either darkness, or rely on both expensive and environmentally unsafe sources of fuel like kerosene, diesel, or firewood. And this impacts their health, it impacts their livelihoods, ability to generate livelihoods, and impacts their ability to access education when the sun goes down. So we understand as governments, as states, you want to keep an essential commodity like electricity affordable. But it is ironical that in attempting to keep it affordable, you're making it unavailable. So indeed, the most expensive power for an individual is the power they don't get. And they have to resort, like I said, to far more expensive, inefficient, and polluting sources. And until we get this problem sorted out, I fear for all the other good efforts that are being made around the energy electricity space, many of which that will be discussed, I think were discussed this morning, will be discussed this afternoon and tomorrow. So while electricity is being offered nominally at a cheap rate, it is just not available. And at the other end of the spectrum, and why is this happening? It's not just because the prices are artificially set low, which they are. Certain the consumer segments, individuals, householders get preferential rates, and there are whole swaths of the population that either just don't pay their bills or are encouraged not to pay their bills, and that's mainly from the farmer community. At the other end of the spectrum, the industrial and commercial parts of the economy that are essential for our growth, for generating employment, for generating value, are forced to cross-subsidize. And when they seek to get around this in ways that are perfectly legal and encouraged by policy through mechanisms like open access or generating rooftop solar, they are thwarted by these very same discoms. Why? Because they do not want to lose their most reliable and lucrative source of revenue. So we're in this catch-22. It's a political economy's problem. The political system in this country has to decide, that electricity is not just, should not be treated as a way of cheaply getting votes, because you're fundamentally impacting the overall system and the economy. One clear way this is happening is that the power companies either not getting paid for the electricity they supply, or are just not running, and thereby being able to generate any electricity. All these power companies have significant debt, and they, as a group, represent one of the largest components of the very significant bad loan, non-performing asset problem that our banking sector is facing today. And once banks, as we've seen, have bad assets on their books, their ability to create fresh, productive credit goes away. And that impacts the rest of the economy. So, I think we need to see the whole chain through, how offering, say, a farmer the ability not to pay for their electricity is going to have an impact in other parts of the economy. And I think one of the biggest challenges this government has been facing has been increasing employment, increasing economic activity, getting banks healthy, and getting them back to funding small, medium, and large businesses, which is what they were supposed to do. And you need a healthy distribution sector to make many of the investments we'll be discussing over the next year or two. We need to upgrade our distribution, the grid lines. We need the ability to evacuate all the new power, especially the renewable power that will be generated. We need investments in transformers, which are in many parts of the country old and inefficient and continue to break down. We need healthy distribution companies to plan and integrate this new variable source of power that we're talking about. And if they continue to be mired in their own losses, they will not move forward, and they will drag down the power generation sector with them, and in turn the banks, and in turn the entire economy. I'm sorry to be not more optimistic. I am optimistic, but I think we need to, as we discuss all the great opportunities we have, we need to really recognize the elephant in the room, because that is what it is. It's this large elephant that is just being nursed along, and we haven't been able to figure out how to get it out of the room. So I'm sure the conversations will be far more optimistic, will be much more solutions-oriented, and will give us a lot of hope and ability to maybe get around these problems that I've highlighted. I think there is a lot of hope and reasons to be hopeful. We've discussed the progress we've made, and I think there's a clear path. for more to be done. Most importantly, at least at the federal level, there is a clear political will for many of the things that are needed for the transition to cleaner energy, to meet our energy needs, to fight climate change. And I hope by the evening tomorrow we'll all leave this gathering with renewed sense of purpose, with great ideas. And I wish CEEW and all participants a very productive conference, and I thank you for listening to me this afternoon. Thank you.